When the Black Hawk descended onto the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado 20 minutes later, the 3 SEAL candidates who had ordered Lieutenant Claire Morgan to mop the floor learned the hardest lesson of their military careers. Never assume you know who someone is based on how they look. My name is Claire Morgan. Call sign, Frost. I'm 32 years old, and I've been operating in the darkest corners of the world for the past decade. Most people have never heard of me. That's exactly how it should be. It was 1100 hours on a scorching Tuesday in July, when I walked through the gates of the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California. The sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt, heat shimmering in waves across the training compound. I wore basic utilities with no rank insignia visible, no patches, no indicators of who I was or what I did. Just plain camouflage and boots. My duffel bag contained everything I needed for a 72-hour wait before my transport to a classified location. The base was busy with training evolutions. I could hear instructors shouting at BUDS candidates in the distance. The sound of gunfire from the ranges. The rhythmic cadence of running formations. I made my way toward the transient personnel office to check in and find temporary quarters. That's when I encountered them. 3 SEAL candidates, probably in their mid-20s, stood near the mess hall entrance. They wore the confident swagger of men who had made it through BUDS and thought they knew everything about being warriors. The leader was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of build that came from obsessive weight training. His name tape read Brennan. He noticed me walking past and nudged his companions. "Hey," his voice carried across the courtyard. "You, stop." I stopped, turning to face them. Brennan walked over, his friends following. He looked me up and down with an expression that was equal parts amusement and contempt. "You lost, recruit. Women's barracks are on the other side of base. I'm not lost. I'm checking in with transient personnel." "Checking in?" He laughed. "Let me guess. Admin duty? Medical corps? Maybe public affairs?" His friends laughed with him. "I'm waiting for transport," I said evenly. "I'll be here 72 hours maximum." Brennan stepped closer, invading my personal space in the way men do when they want to intimidate. "You know what the problem is with women in special operations? They think showing up is enough. They think passing watered-down standards means they belong." I said nothing, my face expressionless. One of his friends, whose name tape read Carson, spoke up. "The mess hall is a disaster. Some recruits left it trashed after breakfast. Since you're waiting around anyway, why don't you make yourself useful?" Brennan smiled at that suggestion. "Good idea. Hey, recruit, go inside and grab a mop. The floors need cleaning. Bathrooms too while you're at it. I'm not a recruit, and I'm not assigned cleaning duty." Brennan's smile faded. "I don't care what you think you are. On this base, women need to prove they deserve to be here. So unless you want me to report you for insubordination, you'll get the mop and start cleaning. Now." The 3rd SEAL, Rodriguez, added with a smirk. "Think of it as character building. Every good sailor knows how to swab a deck, right?" They all laughed at that. I looked at each of them carefully, memorizing their faces. In my line of work, you learn to read people quickly. These 3 were bullies who had probably never been in real combat. They had the arrogance of youth and training, but lacked the humility that actual warfare teaches you. I could have told them who I was. Could have explained that I was waiting for classified transport, could have mentioned my rank. But I didn't. Because I wanted to see how far they would take this. And because sometimes, the best lessons are the ones that hurt. "Fine," I said quietly. "Where's the mop?" Brennan looked surprised that I had capitulated so easily. "Inside." Janitor's closet near the kitchen. And don't half-ass it. I want those floors spotless and the bathrooms clean enough to eat off." His friends high-fived each other as I walked past them into the mess hall. Inside, the facility was indeed messy. Trays left on tables, food debris on the floor, general disorder from a breakfast service that had served 200 personnel. I found the janitor's closet and pulled out a mop and bucket. As I began filling the bucket with water, 2 female sailors walked past. They saw me mopping, and their expressions showed sympathy mixed with resignation. They had probably experienced similar treatment. One of them whispered as they passed, "Don't let them see it bothers you. That's what they want." I nodded, but said nothing. For the next 20 minutes, I mopped floors and cleaned bathrooms. Through the windows, I could see Brennan and his friends watching and laughing, probably telling stories to other SEALs about the woman they had put in her place. I wasn't angry. Anger was an emotion I had learned to control years ago. When you're operating behind enemy lines, anger gets you killed. But I was taking notes. Mental notes about character, about judgment, about the kind of men who used rank and gender to diminish others. The bathrooms were particularly disgusting. These men were pigs who apparently believed that cleaning was beneath them. I scrubbed toilets, mopped floors, cleaned sinks, all while wearing my utilities in the heat, sweat soaking through my shirt. Through the bathroom window, I could hear voices outside. Brennan's voice carried clearly. "Did you see how quick she jumped to it? Women always fall in line when you assert dominance. It's about establishing hierarchy." Carson responded, "Think she'll file a complaint?" "Who would she complain to? She's nobody. Probably some admin clerk waiting for a ride to her next desk job." They laughed. I continued cleaning, my face expressionless, my mind calm. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out and glanced at the message. "Nightfall op moved up. Extract in 20 minutes. Blackhawk inbound to your location. Be ready." I typed back a quick acknowledgement and put the phone away. 20 minutes. Just enough time to finish what I was doing. I completed the bathroom cleaning, returned to the main mess hall floor, and finished mopping the last section. Through the windows, I could see Brennan and his group still standing outside, occasionally glancing in to check on my progress. I was wringing out the mop for the final time when I heard it. A sound every military person recognizes instantly. The distinctive whop 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 of helicopter blades. But these weren't training helos. This was a Blackhawk, and it was coming in fast and low. Outside, heads turned toward the sound. The Blackhawk appeared over the base perimeter, descending rapidly toward the central courtyard. This was not a scheduled landing. The helo was clearly on an urgent mission. It touched down in a storm of rotor wash that scattered dust and loose papers across the compound. Before the wheels had fully settled, 2 men jumped out. Both wore khaki uniforms with insignia that indicated 06 rank. Captains. Senior officers who didn't typically show up in Blackhawks for routine business. I could see them through the windows, looking around urgently. One of them grabbed a passing sailor. "Where is Lieutenant Morgan? Where is Frost?" The sailor looked confused and pointed toward the administrative building. The officers ran in that direction, but they were intercepted by a master chief who had emerged from the training building. I could see the conversation, but couldn't hear it. The master chief was pointing toward the mess hall. Toward me. The 2 captains immediately changed direction and headed straight for the building I was in. Outside, Brennan and his friends were watching this unfold with growing confusion. I set down the mop, picked up my duffel bag from where I had left it near the entrance, and waited. The doors burst open. The 2 captains entered, their eyes scanning the room until they found me standing there in my sweat-stained utilities, holding a mop bucket. Their reaction was immediate and instinctive. Both snapped to attention and rendered sharp salutes. "Lieutenant Morgan," the first captain said, his voice urgent. "Nightfall has been moved up. The situation in theater deteriorated faster than expected. JSOC needs you wheels up in 5 minutes." The second captain added, "The Secretary of Defense specifically requested you by name. This comes from the highest level." I set down the bucket and returned their salutes. "Understood. I'm ready." That's when Brennan and his friends entered the mess hall, probably curious about why 2 captains had arrived in a Black Hawk looking for someone. They stopped dead when they saw the captain saluting me. I walked toward the exit, passing directly by Brennan and his group. As I passed, unzipped my duffel and pulled out my jacket, the one with all my patches and insignia. I put it on slowly, deliberately, letting them see each patch as it became visible. First, the gold trident. Not the standard SEAL trident, but the special gold version given only to DevGru members. SEAL Team 6. Then the unit patch, a classified insignia that most people on base had never seen because it represented operations that officially didn't exist. Then my ribbons and medals, including the pale blue ribbon with white stars that represented the Medal of Honor. I watched the color drain from Brennan's face as he processed what he was seeing. The captains waited respectfully as I finished putting on my jacket. Then I turned to face Brennan directly, looked him in the eyes with a cold expression I reserved for enemies. "The bathroom still needs cleaning, recruit," I said quietly. Then I walked out, the captains flanking me as we headed toward the waiting Black Hawk. Behind me, I heard the Master Chief's voice, loud and clear. "Attention on deck." Every sailor in the courtyard snapped to attention as I walked past. Master Chief approached Brennan's group, his face showing barely controlled rage. "Do any of you idiots know who that is?" Silence. "That is Lieutenant Claire Morgan, call sign Frost, DevGru operator. The only woman to ever serve in SEAL Team 6 in a direct action role. She has more confirmed kills than this entire base combined." You stepped closer to Brennan, and you just ordered a Medal of Honor recipient to mop floors. I reached the Black Hawk and climbed aboard. The captains followed. The crew chief secured the door. As we lifted off, I looked down at the base, at Brennan and his friends standing in the courtyard, frozen in shock, at the Master Chief who was clearly tearing into them. One of the captains spoke over the intercom. "Lieutenant, we apologize for the confusion with your arrival. If we had known you were being harassed—" "It's fine," I said. "Some lessons need to be learned the hard way." The Black Hawk banked hard and accelerated, leaving Naval Special Warfare Center behind. I had a mission to complete, a high-value target to eliminate, a job that only a handful of operators in the world could accomplish. But I had also just taught 3 arrogant SEAL candidates the most important lesson they would ever learn. Never judge a warrior by their appearance. Never assume you know someone's capabilities based on how they look. And never, ever underestimate a woman in uniform, especially one holding a mop. The Black Hawk climbed to altitude, heading northeast toward a classified staging area. I sat in the troop compartment, stripping off my sweat-soaked utilities and changing into mission-ready gear from my duffel. One of the captains, whose name tape read Sullivan, watched with professional interest as I methodically checked my equipment. "Lieutenant," he said over the intercom, "I have to ask. Why did you comply with those candidates? You could have identified yourself immediately." "I could have," I said, pulling on my tactical pants. "But then, they wouldn't have learned anything. Learned what? That their assumptions make them vulnerable. In our line of work, underestimating someone gets you killed. Better they learn that lesson from me mopping floors than from an enemy who looks harmless. The second captain, Patterson, nodded slowly. Still, ordering a Medal of Honor recipient to clean bathrooms. The Master Chief is going to make their lives hell. Good, I said simply. They need to understand that respect isn't about gender or appearance. It's about what you've done, what you've sacrificed, what you've earned. Sullivan pulled out a tablet and showed me the mission brief. Nightfall has evolved. Original target was a single HVT in Yemen. Intelligence now indicates he's meeting with 2 other high-value individuals. We have a 12-hour window before they disperse. What's the insertion method? Halo jump at 25,000 feet. You'll be solo for the approach. Delta team will be on standby for extraction, but you're alone for target acquisition and elimination. Standard operating procedure for me. Patterson leaned forward. Lieutenant, the intelligence community specifically requested you because of your success rate and your ability to operate independently in hostile territory. This is a zero-fail mission, I understand. As the Black Hawk flew, Sullivan continued the briefing. Target 1 is Ibrahim al-Rashid, Al-Qaeda operations commander, responsible for 3 attacks on U.S. interests in the past year, including the embassy bombing in Nairobi that killed 23 people. I memorized his face from the photos. Target 2 is Yusuf Khalidi, explosives expert, trained hundreds of bomb makers. IEDs with his signature have killed over 200 coalition troops. Show me his photo. Sullivan swiped to the next image. I studied it carefully, noting distinctive features. Target 3 is the priority. Ahmad Hassan al-Kuwaiti. He's the financier. Moves money for terrorist operations across 3 continents. If we eliminate him, we cripple their funding infrastructure for years. All 3 in one location, I said. That's unusual. It is. Which is why the window is so narrow. They're paranoid about meeting together. This might be our only chance. What's the tactical situation on the ground? The meeting is in a compound outside Sana'a. Civilian population nearby but not in the immediate target area. Approximately 20 guards. Sophisticated security systems. They're expecting trouble, just not from the sky. I smiled slightly at that. They never expect the sky. Patterson pulled up aerial reconnaissance imagery. This is real-time satellite feed from 2 hours ago. The compound has 3 buildings. Intelligence suggests the meeting will be in the central structure. 2nd floor. What's the egress plan? You eliminate the targets, move to this position. He pointed to a location 2 kilometers from the compound. And Delta will extract via helo. Total mission time from jump to extraction should be under 4 hours. Acceptable. As we flew, I continued gearing up. Tactical vest with armor plates, communications equipment, night vision optics, suppressed sidearm. And my primary weapon. A custom-built precision rifle that I had used on dozens of operations. Sullivan watched me check each piece of equipment with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant? Can I ask you something personal? Depends on the question. How did you end up in DevGru? Women aren't typically assigned to direct action roles in SEAL teams. I looked at him directly. I wasn't assigned. I volunteered. And I passed every selection and training requirement the same as the men. No modifications, no special treatment. When DevGru needed a precision shooter for operations requiring someone who could blend in certain environments, I was the most qualified candidate. Have you faced resistance from the teams? Initially, yes. Some of the operators thought I was a political statement. A diversity hire. until I started bringing home results. Patterson spoke up. Your record speaks for itself. 63 confirmed kills across 4 years of operations, 0 mission failures. You're in the top 5 most effective DevGRU operators currently active. I don't operate for statistics, I said. I operate to eliminate threats and bring my team home safely. Which is exactly why you're on this bird, Sullivan said. This mission requires someone who can think independently, adapt to changing circumstances, and execute with precision under pressure. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. Lieutenant, we're 20 minutes from the drop zone. Weather is good. Winds are acceptable for halo insertion. Copy that, I said. I stood and began the process of donning my parachute rig and oxygen equipment. At 25,000 feet, I would need supplemental oxygen until I descended to breathable altitude. Sullivan stood as well. Lieutenant, before you go, I need to tell you something. What happened to Coronado this morning? That's going to have consequences for those SEAL candidates. It should, I said. They demonstrated poor judgment and unprofessional conduct. The Master Chief is recommending formal counseling, possibly removal from their team assignments pending review. I paused in my equipment check. Captain, I don't want their careers destroyed because they were ignorant. I want them educated. There's a difference. You're more forgiving than I would be. I'm practical. The Navy invested hundreds of thousands of dollars training those men. Throwing that investment away because they made a mistake seems wasteful. But they need to understand why their behavior was wrong. Sullivan nodded slowly. I'll pass that along. The Master Chief may still make their lives uncomfortable for a while. That's his prerogative, I said with a slight smile. A little discomfort builds character. The Black Hawk began its descent toward the staging area, a remote airfield in Djibouti, where I would transfer to the aircraft that would take me to altitude for the jump. Patterson handed me a sealed envelope. Final intelligence update. 2 additional assets in theater that you can call on if the situation deteriorates. Code words and contact protocols are inside. I tucked the envelope into my vest. Anything else I need to know? Just that you have the full support of JSOC, the CIA, and the White House. This mission is priority alpha. Whatever you need, you get. What I need is for everyone to stay out of my way and let me do my job. Patterson smiled. That we can definitely do. The Black Hawk touched down at the airfield. I grabbed my equipment and exited into the blazing African heat. A C-130 sat on the tarmac, engines already running. This was my ride to altitude. Sullivan and Patterson followed me to the aircraft. Sullivan extended his hand. Good hunting, Lieutenant. Bring those targets down and come home safe. I shook his hand. That's the plan, Captain. Patterson shook my hand as well. The nation is counting on you, Frost. The nation is always counting on someone, I said. Today it's my turn. I climbed aboard the C-130, and the crew chief secured the ramp. The aircraft immediately began taxiing. Inside, I was alone except for the load master and the jump master, who would verify my equipment and coordinate the drop. The jump master was a grizzled Air Force technical sergeant, with the weathered look of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Lieutenant Morgan, he said, extending his hand. I'm Sergeant Hayes. I'll be managing your insertion. Pleased to meet you, Sergeant. I've read your file, he said as we began the climb to altitude. 47 halo jumps, 15 combat insertions. You're one of the most experienced jumpers I've worked with. Thank you, Sergeant. He began checking my equipment with professional thoroughness. Parachute rigging, oxygen connections, altimeter, communication gear. "Everything looks good," he said. "We'll reach 25,000 feet in approximately 90 minutes. Weather over the target area is clear. Winds at altitude are 15 knots, well within acceptable parameters." "What's the offset from target?" 12 miles. You'll free fall to 5,000 feet before deploying your chute. That gives you approximately 2 minutes of canopy time to reach the landing zone." "I've done it before." "I know. But this is my responsibility until you leave this aircraft. So I'm going to verify everything twice." I appreciated his professionalism. For the next 90 minutes, I reviewed the mission brief, memorized target photos, and mentally rehearsed the operation. This was my pre-mission ritual. Visualize success, plan for contingencies, prepare for the unexpected. Hayes provided regular updates on altitude and time to drop. At 22,000 feet, I began pre-breathing pure oxygen to purge nitrogen from my blood and prevent decompression sickness. At 25,000 feet, Hayes signaled that we were approaching the release point. I stood and moved to the ramp. The temperature at this altitude was minus 40 degrees. The air was so thin that without supplemental oxygen, I would lose consciousness in seconds. Hayes performed his final checks. "All green, Lieutenant. You are go for insertion." I gave him a thumbs up. The ramp lowered, revealing the night sky and the distant lights of Yemen below. Hayes's voice came through my helmet comms. 30 seconds. I positioned myself at the edge of the ramp. 15 seconds. I focused on my breathing, my heart rate steady despite the adrenaline. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, go, go, go. I stepped off the ramp and into the void. The sudden silence was profound. Just the whistle of wind as I accelerated toward terminal velocity, falling through the darkness at over 120 miles per hour. This was my element. The dark, cold, solitude. This was where I operated best. I checked my altimeter. 24,000 feet. 23. 22. Below me, lights of Yemen spread out like a constellation. Somewhere in that darkness was my target. 3 men who believed they were safe, who believed their security measures would protect them. They were wrong, because they hadn't planned for someone falling from the sky. They hadn't planned for frost. At 5,000 feet, I deployed my parachute. The canopy snapped open above me, jerking me from free fall to a controlled descent. I used the steering toggles to guide myself toward the landing zone, a clear area approximately 1 kilometer from the target compound. The ground rushed up to meet me. I executed a perfect landing, absorbed the impact with my legs, and immediately collapsed my chute. Within seconds, I had gathered the parachute, buried it in a shallow depression, and moved to cover. I pulled out my rifle and attached the night vision scope. Phase 1 complete. Now came the dangerous part. I had 4 hours to reach the compound, eliminate 3 high-value targets, and reach the extraction point. And somewhere on this base in Coronado, 3 SEAL candidates were learning that the woman they had ordered to mop floors was now falling from the sky into hostile territory to do a job that only the very best could accomplish. I smiled to myself and began moving toward the target. I moved through the darkness like a ghost, covering ground with the efficiency born from years of operating in hostile territory. The compound was 1 kilometer ahead, and I had 3 hours before the targets were scheduled to disperse. Through my night vision, the Yemeni landscape appeared in shades of green. Rocky terrain, sparse vegetation, occasional buildings in the distance. The compound itself was lit up like a beacon, their security lights making them feel safe, while actually making my approach easier. I reached an overwatch position 400 meters from the target and went prone behind a rocky outcropping. From here, I had clear line of sight to the compound, while remaining invisible in the darkness. I pulled out my spotting scope and began detailed reconnaissance. The compound consisted of 3 buildings, arranged in a U-shape, around a central courtyard. Guards patrolled the perimeter, exactly as intelligence had predicted. I counted them carefully. 22, not 20. 2 more than expected. I keyed my radio, speaking quietly. Frost to Overwatch, on target. 22 hostiles visible, confirmed target presence. The response came immediately from a CIA operations center somewhere monitoring the mission. Overwatch copies. Thermal imaging confirms 3 individuals matching target descriptions, in the central building, 2nd floor, eastern room. Multiple other heat signatures throughout compound. I adjusted my scope, focusing on the 2nd floor windows. Through thermal imaging equipment that the CIA was feeding to my heads-up display, I could see the heat signatures. 3 men sitting around what appeared to be a table. My targets. Time check, 2200 local time. Intelligence estimates meeting will conclude at 0100. Copy. Moving to secondary position for better angle. I leopard crawled backward from my position, moved laterally 200 meters, and established a new overwatch point. This position gave me a clear shot through the eastern window. I set up my rifle carefully. Bipod deployed. Scope adjusted for range, wind, and elevation. Suppressor attached. The beauty of a suppressed rifle at 400 meters was that by the time anyone heard the shot, I would be gone. But I couldn't just shoot through the window. I needed confirmation that all 3 targets were present and that civilian casualties would be 0. I settled into wait. Controlling my breathing, my heart rate steady at 50 beats per minute. This was what I did best. The patience of a predator. For 30 minutes, I watched through my scope as guards patrolled, as people moved through the compound, as life continued normally for men who had no idea they were being watched. Then the door to the 2nd floor room opened. A young man entered carrying a tray of tea. He set it on the table, bowed respectfully, and left. Through my thermal scope, I could see the 3 heat signatures reach for the teacups. My radio crackled. Frost, we have confirmation, all 3 targets in the same room. You are cleared hot. I adjusted my scope one final time, compensating for a slight wind shift. Target 1, Ibrahim al-Rashid, sat facing the window. The operations commander who had ordered the embassy bombing. Target 2, Yusuf Khalidi, sat to his left. The bomb maker responsible for hundreds of coalition deaths. Target 3, Ahmad al-Kuwaiti, sat across from them. The financier who made it all possible. I took a slow breath. Let it half out. Held. My finger touched the trigger. The first shot broke clean. The suppressed rifle made a sound like a harsh cough. Through my scope I saw al-Rashid's head snap back. He collapsed instantly. The other 2 men froze for a fraction of a second, confused about what had just happened. That fraction was all I needed. Second shot. Khalidi went down. Third shot. Al-Kuwaiti tried to stand, tried to run. He made it 2 steps before my bullet found him. 3 shots, 3 kills. Elapsed time, 4 seconds. Through my scope, I watched the room. All 3 targets were down and not moving. I keyed my radio. Frost to Overwatch. 3 targets eliminated. Compound will react in approximately 30 seconds. Beginning egress. Copy Frost. Delta team is inbound to extraction point. ETA 12 minutes. I broke down my rifle with practice speed, packed it into my kit, and began moving away from the compound at a fast jog. Behind me, I heard the first shouts as someone discovered the bodies. Then more shouting. Then gunfire as panicked guards shot at shadows. But I was already 400 meters away, and moving fast through the darkness. The extraction point was 2 kilometers north. Rocky terrain that would slow down any pursuit, but that I had memorized from the satellite imagery. I ran with the night vision giving me clear sight while anyone following would be stumbling blind. My radio crackled. Frost, be advised. Compound has mobilized vehicles. 4 trucks heading in your direction. I adjusted my course, angling toward rougher terrain, where vehicles couldn't follow. The sound of engines grew louder behind me. Searchlights swept the darkness, looking for whoever had just killed their leadership. I reached a rocky slope and scrambled up it, using handholds that would be invisible without night vision. At the top, I paused to look back. 4 trucks had stopped at the base of the slope. Men were dismounting, shouting orders, beginning to search on foot. They were too far behind. They would never catch me. I continued north, maintaining a steady pace that would cover ground without exhausting me. Frost. Delta is at extraction point. They have you on thermal. Continue current heading. Copy. 5 minutes later, I crested a ridge and saw the extraction point below. A flat area where a Black Hawk could land briefly. The helo was already there, rotors turning, door gunners scanning for threats. I sprinted down the slope toward it. The crew chief saw me coming and waved me in. I dove through the door, and the Black Hawk immediately lifted off. The pilot not wasting a second. As we climbed, I could see the lights of the search trucks in the distance, still looking for a ghost that was already gone. The Delta team leader, a major whose name tape read Santos, grinned at me. Clean work, Frost. 3 targets, 0 complications. Textbook operation. Just another day at the office, I said, stripping off my gear. Santos handed me a bottle of water. JSOC is very pleased. Those 3 were high on the target list. You just saved a lot of lives. That's the job. As the Black Hawk flew toward safety, I allowed myself to relax slightly. The mission was complete. The targets were eliminated. I was alive and uninjured. In a few hours, I would be debriefed. In a few days, I would be back at my base, preparing for the next operation. But first, I was going to enjoy the simple pleasure of being alive. Santos sat down across from me. Frost, I have to tell you something. The story from Coronado has already spread through the community. I raised an eyebrow. What story? About you mopping floors while SEAL candidates mocked you. Then the Black Hawk arrival, the reveal. It's becoming legendary. I smiled slightly. It shouldn't be. It was just ignorance meeting reality. Maybe. But it's teaching a lesson that a lot of young operators need to learn. That you can't judge capability by appearance. Good. Then maybe it was worth the 20 minutes of cleaning bathrooms. The Black Hawk crossed into friendly airspace, and I felt the tension fully release from my body. We landed at a forward operating base in Djibouti, where I would stay for debriefing before returning to the United States. As I climbed out of the helo, a familiar face was waiting. Captain Sullivan from the original Black Hawk that had picked me up at Coronado. Lieutenant Morgan, he said with a salute. Successful mission. 3 targets eliminated. 0 casualties. Mission complete. Outstanding. The Secretary of Defense sends his personal congratulations. Tell him I was just doing my job. Sullivan smiled. He said you would say that. He also said to tell you that you have 72 hours of mandatory rest before you can be assigned another operation. I can work with that. He gestured toward a building. Debriefing is ready when you are. But first, I thought you might want to see something. He pulled out his phone and showed me a video. It was from Coronado. Shot by someone at the base. It showed the moment I had walked out of the mess hall wearing my jacket with all my patches and insignia. The shock on Brennan's face. The Master Chief tearing into the SEAL candidates. The video had been viewed over 100,000 times within the SEAL community. The caption read, "Never judge a warrior by their appearance. Frost teaches a lesson." I watched it without expression. Has this caused problems? Sullivan shook his head. Actually, it's been overwhelmingly positive. A lot of senior operators are using it as a teaching moment. Talking about respect, about assumptions, about judging people by their actions rather than their appearance. What about Brennan and his group? They're on administrative duty pending review. But the Master Chief recommended counseling and education rather than formal punishment. He said you specifically requested that their careers not be destroyed. I did. They were ignorant, not malicious. That's generous of you. It's practical. The Navy needs good operators. Those 3 can become good operators if they learn from this. Sullivan led me toward the debriefing building. You know, Frost, A lot of people in your position would have made a bigger deal out of what happened. 8. Filed complaints, demanded punishment, used it for personal gain. I'm not interested in personal gain, I said. I'm interested in completing missions and going home alive. That's what makes you exceptional. The debriefing took 2 hours. I walked intelligence officers through every detail of the operation, confirmed the kills, provided tactical observations that might be useful for future operations. When it was done, Sullivan walked me to temporary quarters. Get some rest, Lieutenant. You've earned it. I will. But first, I need to do something. I pulled out my phone and composed an email to the Master Chief at Coronado. Master Chief, I understand that SEAL candidates Brennan, Carson, and Rodriguez are facing disciplinary action for their conduct toward me. I want to formally request that this action focus on education rather than punishment. These 3 men demonstrated poor judgment and unprofessional conduct. But they are still valuable assets who have completed demanding training. Rather than destroy their careers, I recommend they receive mandatory training on respect, professionalism, and the dangers of assumption. I also recommend they be assigned to work with female service members in various roles to better understand and appreciate the contributions of women in the military. Their mistake was ignorance, not malice. Let's fix the ignorance. Respectfully, Lt. Claire Morgan. I hit send and put my phone away. Sullivan had watched me compose the message. You're a better person than most, Frost. I'm just trying to make sure the lesson sticks without ruining lives. I entered my quarters, dropped my gear, and lay down on the cot. For the first time in 36 hours, I allowed myself to sleep. Tomorrow, I would return to Coronado. I would face those 3 SEAL candidates again, and we would see if they had learned anything. 72 hours later, I stepped off a C-130 at Naval Air Station North Island, just across the bay from Coronado. The California sun hit my face, warm and familiar after the heat of Africa. A staff car was waiting on the tarmac. The driver, a young sailor, saluted as I approached. Lieutenant Morgan, I'm here to take you to Naval Special Warfare Center. Thank you. As we drove across the Coronado Bridge, I looked out at the ocean, at the base in the distance, and wondered what reception awaited me. The story had spread. I knew that from the messages I had received during my rest period. Officers congratulating me, fellow operators sharing the video. Even some media outlets had tried to get the story, though DevGru's operations remained classified. We pulled through the gates of the Naval Special Warfare Center. Marines at the gate snapped to attention when they saw my uniform and patches. The driver took me to the headquarters building where I was scheduled to meet with the base commander and the Master Chief. Inside, I was immediately escorted to a conference room. Master Chief Wilson was waiting, along with Captain Henderson, the base commander. Both stood when I entered and saluted. Lieutenant Morgan, Henderson said. Welcome back. Please, sit down. I took a seat across from them. Henderson pulled out a file. First, let me say that your actions in Yemen were exceptional. 3 high-value targets eliminated with 0 complications. JSOC has already credited your mission with disrupting a major terrorist financing network. Thank you, sir. Second, he continued. We need to address the incident that occurred here prior to your deployment. I nodded. Master Chief Wilson leaned forward. Lieutenant, I want to personally apologize for what happened. Those 3 candidates showed complete lack of judgment and professionalism. Their behavior was inexcusable. I appreciate that, Master Chief. But I hope we can turn this into a teaching opportunity rather than just punishment. Henderson smiled slightly. We received your email. Your recommendation for education over destruction. That's remarkably gracious, given what they put you through. I believe those 3 men can still be valuable operators if they learn from this experience. Wilson pulled out 3 files. Brennan, Carson, and Rodriguez have been assigned mandatory training over the next 3 months. They'll be working with female service members across multiple roles, learning about the contributions of women in the military. They'll also undergo counseling on professionalism and respect. That sounds appropriate. Additionally, Henderson added, they've been required to write formal apologies to you, and they've requested the opportunity to apologize in person. I considered this. Are they sincere, or are they just trying to save their careers? Wilson met my eyes. At first, probably trying to save their careers. But after they learned who you really are, what you've done, I believe genuine remorse set in, especially with Brennan. He's been devastated by his actions. Then, I'll meet with them. Henderson checked his watch. They're waiting outside. We can bring them in now, or you can take time to prepare. Now is fine. Wilson stepped out and returned moments later, with the 3 SEAL candidates. Brennan, Carson, and Rodriguez entered in their dress uniforms, their faces showing a mixture of shame and anxiety. They came to attention in front of me. Lieutenant Morgan, Brennan said, his voice shaking slightly. We're here to formally apologize for our conduct. What we did was disrespectful, unprofessional, and completely inappropriate. Carson continued. We made assumptions based on your appearance and gender. We demonstrated exactly the kind of thinking that gets people killed in combat. We're sorry. Rodriguez added quietly. Ma'am? We've spent the past 72 hours learning about your operational history. What you've accomplished, what you've sacrificed. We are ashamed that we treated you the way we did. I studied each of them carefully. Their body language showed genuine contrition, not just performance for the officers present. At ease, I said. Sit down. They sat, looking uncomfortable. I'm going to tell you something, I began. What happened in that courtyard was inevitable. Not with me specifically, but with someone. Because all 3 of you were operating with fundamental misunderstandings about what makes an effective warrior. They listened intently. You saw a woman in basic utilities with no visible rank, and you immediately assumed she was inferior. That assumption made you vulnerable. If I had been an enemy operative, that assumption could have gotten you killed. Brennan spoke up
hesitantly. Yeah, ma'am. We understand that now. The lesson has been learned. Has it? Or have you just learned not to underestimate me specifically? I leaned forward. The real lesson isn't about me. It's about the fundamental principle that capability cannot be judged by appearance. The enemy doesn't always look like what you expect. The person who saves your life might not look like a warrior, and the deadliest operator in the room might be holding a mop. Carson nodded slowly. You're right, ma'am. We need to change how we think about everyone, not just you. I pulled out 3 envelopes from my bag. Each of these contains a letter I've written to your command evaluating your potential as operators. I could have written that you're unfit for service, that your judgment is fatally flawed, that you should be removed from the teams. All 3 tensed. But I didn't write that. I wrote that you demonstrated poor judgment in a non-combat situation, but that with proper education and mentoring, you have the potential to become effective operators. Rodriguez's eyes widened. Ma'am, why would you do that for us after what we did? Because I believe people can learn from mistakes, and because the Navy invested a lot of resources training you. Throwing that away over one incident of ignorance seems wasteful. I handed each of them their envelope. But understand this. You each get one chance, one opportunity to prove that you learned from this experience. If I ever hear of any of you treating someone disrespectfully based on gender, appearance, or any other superficial factor, I will personally ensure your careers end immediately. Yes, ma'am, they said in unison. Master Chief Wilson spoke up. These 3 will be assigned to work with Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen for the next month. She runs the Combat Casualty Care course and has extensive operational experience. They'll learn directly from her what women bring to special operations. Good, I said. Learn from her. Listen to her. Respect her expertise. Brennan raised his hand slightly. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Go ahead. How do we make this right? How do we truly make amends for what we did? I thought about that question. You make it right by being better. By treating every person you meet with respect until they prove they don't deserve it. By never making assumptions about capability based on appearance. And by teaching the next generation of operators to do the same. I stood, and they immediately stood with me. You three have an opportunity that most people never get. The opportunity to have your ignorance corrected before it gets someone killed. Use it well. We will, ma'am. Thank you. After they left, Captain Henderson smiled. That was masterfully handled, Lieutenant. You gave them accountability and a path forward. They're young and they made a mistake. But they can still be assets if they learn from it. Wilson pulled out his phone and showed me another video. This one was new. It showed the 3 SEAL candidates working with female Marines, doing training exercises, clearly being humble and respectful. The caption read, "Learning the lesson. Respect earned, not assumed." The video had been shared throughout the SEAL community as a teaching tool. Henderson stood. Lieutenant, you have 2 weeks of leave authorized. After that, you'll return to your regular assignment with DevGru. Unless you have other plans? No other plans, sir. I'll take the leave and report back as scheduled. Excellent. And Lieutenant, thank you for your service, for your professionalism, and for turning a negative situation into a teaching opportunity. Just doing my job, sir. I left the headquarters building and walked across the base toward the transient quarters where my belongings were stored. Marines and sailors I passed stopped to salute or nod respectfully. Word had clearly spread about who I was. Near the mess hall, I saw a group of female sailors working. One of them noticed me and nudged her companions. They all stopped and stood at attention. I walked over to them. At ease. Carry on with your work. Ma'am, one of them said. A young sailor with the rank of Petty Officer 3rd Class. I just wanted to say thank you. For what you did. For showing everyone that women belong here. You don't need to thank me. You belong here because you earned it, same as anyone else. Still, her companion said, what happened in this courtyard last week? It meant something to us. Seeing those SEAL candidates learn that lesson, it matters. I looked at each of them. Listen to me. Don't wait for someone else to prove your worth. You prove it every day through your actions, your professionalism, your dedication. Be so undeniably competent that no one can question whether you belong. They nodded, inspired. And if someone does question it, then you handle it with professionalism and let your work speak for itself. Just like you're doing right now. I continued to my quarters, packed my belongings, and prepared to leave the base. As I walked to the parking lot where a rental car was waiting, I heard someone calling behind me. Lieutenant Morgan, wait. I turned to see Brennan jogging toward me. He stopped a respectful distance away. Ma'am, I know I already apologized formally, but I needed to say something else. Go ahead. When I saw you walk out of that mess hall wearing your jacket, when I saw all those patches and that Medal of Honor, I felt sick. Not just because I was in trouble, but because I realized how badly I had failed as a warrior. He paused, gathering his thoughts. My entire life, I've been taught to respect the uniform, to honor those who serve, to never judge based on superficial factors. And in one moment of arrogance, I violated all of that. With someone who embodies everything I'm supposed to aspire to. I listened without interrupting. I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my career making sure no one else makes the mistake I made. I'm going to teach respect, professionalism, and humility. Because of you. That's good to hear, Brennan. Use this experience to become better. Ma'am, one more thing. The story about you, it's becoming legendary in the community. The Mop and the Black Hawk. Everyone is talking about it. I smiled slightly. Good. If my 20 minutes of mopping floors teaches a generation of operators not to judge people by appearance, then it was time well spent. It will, ma'am. I promise you that. I shook his hand. Then we're good, Brennan. Go be the operator you're capable of being. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I got in my car and drove off the base, heading toward 2 weeks of leave before returning to operational duties. As I drove across the Coronado Bridge, I thought about the past week. The humiliation in the courtyard, the mission in Yemen, the teaching opportunity that had emerged from disrespect. Most operators wanted to be remembered for their successful missions, their combat effectiveness, their tactical expertise. I was going to be remembered for mopping floors. And somehow, that was perfect. Because the real lesson wasn't about me being a highly skilled operator. The lesson was that you could never judge someone's capability by how they looked or what they were doing at any given moment. The janitor might be a genius. The person mopping floors might be a Medal of Honor recipient. The quiet person in the corner might be the most dangerous person in the room. My phone buzzed with a message from Master Chief Wilson. Final count. Your story has been viewed 500,000 times within the military community. It's being used in leadership courses at multiple bases. You've changed the conversation about respect and assumptions. Well done, Frost. I smiled and put my phone away. Mission accomplished, not the one in Yemen, though that was important. But the mission of teaching a generation of warriors that capability comes in unexpected forms, that legends sometimes hold mops, and that underestimating someone based on appearance is the fastest way to lose before the fight even starts. I drove into the sunset, heading toward 2 weeks of peace before returning to the shadows where I operated best. But I knew that somewhere on that base, 3 young SEAL candidates were learning a lesson they would carry for the rest of their lives. And that made the 20 minutes of cleaning bathrooms absolutely worth it.